Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. And after all of my recent creationism-related videos, today we're going to deal with a recent trend in the culture wars. Namely, we're going to address whether or not grown men who play video games are unattractive losers or not. But before I get into this video, I want to make something clear. I have no issue with people who personally dislike video games, and I have no problem with people who prefer not to date or be friends with gamers. Everyone has their own preferences, hobbies, and standards for relationships. This video is specifically responding to the idea that grown men who play video games are automatically losers or unattractive simply because they enjoy gaming as a hobby. Now that we got that prerequisite out of the way, let's get more into today's subject. But also, before we do that, I know, another interruption. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, leave your likes and comments down below if you enjoyed today's video, and be sure to go over there to the other places you can find me at. You can follow me on Creation Social, which is my own Twitter alternative. We're about to hit 100 members on the site. You can also follow me on Spotify, you can subscribe to me on BitChute, you can follow me on Rumble, and you can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter. Now, let's get into the madness of men being losers if they play video games as they grown adults. What started it was this tweet thread on X that you can see by Lizzie Marbach. She said, "I know this is unpopular, but it will always be unattractive for a grown man to play video games. Some women might be understanding or pretend they don't care that you spend hours playing, but they do. It is extremely unattractive to women and will never not be." Then she posts a follow-up tweet saying, "I'm not saying this to attack men, by the way. I'm just speaking objectively here." And the community note attached to this tweet says, "The statement that women find men unattractive for playing video games is entirely subjective, not objective. This user is not speaking objectively in any regard." Which is true, because if you look at the gaming industry, it's a big industry that adults and kids alike are into, and the population of gamers who are women, who are girls, is way bigger than you would think that it would be, because over the last couple of decades, more and more women, more and more girls got into playing video games. So to assign video games as a loser's hobby exclusive to men is really, really dumb, because this does not account for all the women who play video games. And then in her third tweet, Lizzie said, "All sense of rationality and reason goes away when the topic of men playing video games is brought up. The men turn into raging irrational feminists over it. Needs to be studied." Well, pardon me, Lizzie, but I have not seen men turn into raging irrational feminists over this topic. The problem is that your argument is really dumb and hypocritical, and men are responding to it rationally. And then because they're dissenting from your view, you go into the irrational tizzy and you block them on social media if you don't call them a bunch of names. We'll see a good example of this towards the end of the video. But in response to this, someone named Hestia Esquire said in response to Lizzie, "Are hobbies even supposed to be sexually appealing? Do men get turned on by knitting and embroidery? Who cares? You do your hobby for yourself, not as foreplay for your partner." And then Megan Murphy, another one of these so-called conservative women who's on the anti-gamer bandwagon and men who play video games are immature losers, she said, "This is such a stupid take, but one that demonstrates the immaturity and atrophied brains of gamers. There are countless respectable hobbies. Play an instrument, take up jujitsu, go hunting, go to the gym, play a sport, learn to fish, go hiking, build a shed, fix a car. Build." And then Bombadum said in response, "I love my mother, but literally every single time my dad went to the gym, she would get upset. She would lose her mind talking about how he would rather be at judo or out on the ranch and be anywhere else but with her. There was a point that him going and doing anything alone was a serious issue with her, and they almost got divorced over it. Thankfully, she got over it, but all of this advice is almost entirely incongruent with anything any man has seen in the past 30 years. And then Woodland Frog, in response to Bumbadum, said, "They do this, but also if you listen to them and drop your other hobbies and let your life revolve around them, they'll get the ick and leave anyway. Guys, just do what you enjoy and ignore them. They're going to whine regardless." And this is something that I have seen in my life as being true, and it's also the testimony of many men on the internet, because there are a lot of women out there who, if you spend any amount of time on yourself that's not with them or focused on them, they get upset. It's like they think we don't need to unplug and do something else without them at any point in time. But for a lot of men, the hobby of choice that they have is playing video games. Why? Because video games are very engaging. They can be very immersive. It's almost like a movie or a TV show or a book that you can control the action of. Whether it be in a passive sense of control, where you just press a button to choose story options and the way the story goes, or if you're controlling the action directly, like with a fighting game, or with a first-person shooter, or with an RPG, or an action RPG, etc. And then, in response to Lizzie's tweet that we read earlier, Count Dankula said, "It's never just video games. They have a problem with you having literally any hobby that you spend time on. And the real reason they hate this is simple. They don't like you having time that isn't dedicated to them." To which a guy named Crispy Fresh said in response, 100%. This is why women over a long-term relationship will gradually shame a man out of all his hobbies, passions, and interests and leave him a dull husk of what he once was. And that's when she decides he's boring and files for divorce. And we have seen that on the internet over long periods of time, over the last 10, 20 years. People that are turned into husks of their former selves because the girl they're with shames them out of their hobbies. And then suddenly, "I'm not happy. You're not the man that I knew before." And then they dump him. In other words, they change the man into what they claim they want, and then when they succeed, they dump him because he's now boring. Which is a really, really messed up way of doing relationships, by the way. And this issue I'm describing is not something that's unique to the secular world. A lot of Christians do this too. Z's Turning had this response to the whole issue. "This debate over men gaming as a hobby reveals a lot about how modern society views men. You are expected to be a worker droid, devoid of any emotion except for gleeful servitude toward your wife, employer, and government overlords. Humans have always had passive hobbies and interests. Ironically, the same women who shame men for gaming will spend 7 hours a day on social media, usually like TikTok or Instagram, or Facebook. And the same men who shame other men for gaming will spend hours watching sports and gambling. And drinking, don't forget that. We don't care about gaming to impress women. We do it because it's fun and it's an easy way for us to connect with friends who don't live near us." Amen, brother. That one is true. And I'll add to that it's also a great way to connect with people who do live near you. It's called couch gaming. You get 4 people or more in a living room on some couches facing a big screen TV. You do a game that's at least 4 players split screen, and if you have to take turns rotating in and out, then you do it. Like every family function I go to that's just my cousins on both sides of my family, we hook up the video games and do 4-player split screen on that Halo Master Chief Collection or playing Smash Brothers, and we just do that for hours. And it's great because we're playing video games together in the same room, so we're able to have that social interaction that we all need. So I would just like to add that to that part. Even if you train relentlessly hard in the gym, build a business, or work 80 hours a week, everyone needs passive free time. And I agree with that too, because back when I was in college and I was a full-time basketball player who was training all throughout the year and going to school, what I would do in my downtime when I was really tired from working out and doing all my schoolwork is I would play video games, especially in like the summers and the springs of 2008, 2009, and 2010, and I think 2011 and 12 especially. I used to work out a lot, and I do my schoolwork during the school year, but I'd work out a lot. I'd do what I need to do during the day, and then I would spend hours playing Halo 3 or Halo Reach online with my friends and other people. Sometimes I'd be by myself, connecting with them over the internet. Sometimes I'd invite my friends over and we'd go into a 4-player split screen online party and play online games against other people. So yeah, that's a whole thing that we used to do back in the day. He continues, so I see no difference between people who in their free time game, watch Netflix, or scroll on social media. But as I said earlier, any time spent not in servitude to women will be criticized now, and people wonder why men are refusing marriage and family life. It's another form of slavery. And if you find yourself in that situation, guys, that's true. But it is worth pointing out that not all situations are like that. There are lots of women who are into video games. And there are lots of women who are not going to have a problem with you playing video games because they realize that it's just a hobby and it's your particular hobby of interest. And as long as you're not playing games like Hoonie Pop and you're not playing games like 40 plus hours a week like some people do, it's all good. So in another tweet, Megan Murphy said, at the end of the day, gamers are dorks and losers, and everyone knows it. No one is like, oh yeah, those guys are desirable. To which a female Twitter user, God Empress of Mankind, said, I'm marrying a dork and a loser gamer because he's genuinely the sweetest man I've ever met. And you bet you're censored I find him desirable because he's a gamer, a kind and amazing man who on top of that plays games with me. Yeah, since I met him, I wanted him, and now you can pry him away from my cold, dead hands. Now, this is just one female Twitter user, but she represents many females out there who are gamers or at least okay with men who play video games, and they feel exactly the same way as she does. So people like Megan Murphy and people like Lizzie Marbach, they are out to lunch. They are really delusional and ignorant. But I myself had a conversation on this issue with someone who I used to repost all the time on my Twitter account. Someone named AutoCorrect 2.0, a female Christian Twitter user. Unfortunately, she took the wrong position on this, because it's a position not based on fact. Someone named Sam Costner said, every honest man must admit that hearing a woman's voice grind away at scolding, rebuking, or directing, even if the word is technically correct, is an exasperating, unnatural, and loathsome thing. To which AutoCorrect 2.0 said in response, the internet is full of swipes at women like this, but say one thing about video games being less than ideal, and men everywhere dissolve into a puddle of toddler-like tantrums. Maybe women aren't actually the weaker sex or the more delicate vessel anymore. To which I respond, except that a lot of women usually question a man's maturity and masculinity because he plays video games at all. Those are the women men take issue with. And then she says in response to me, yes, it's a fair question if that's how a man spends most of his free time. Now, I took this to mean that she's referring to people who play video games like a full-time job, like 40 plus hours a week. When I was back in high school and I was a gamer outside of school and sports, I used to say, and this was a common thing, I think back in the late 2000s, that guys like that were people who had no lives. Because if you had a life, if you were like a kid going through school and doing homework and sports, you only had so many hours during the week that you could put in, so you could only get so good at playing a video game. So in order for someone to get to a professional level of gaming acumen, gaming skill, they basically have to put in what amounts to a full-time job worth of hours playing video games. And so when we would come across people like that, we would say that they had no life. And we understood that to mean that that was a criticism on their part. Not that they were too good at the game, but the fact that they had all that time to spend on the game meant they weren't spending time doing other things that were more important. That's how I understood it at the time. So I pointed out in response to AutoCorrect 2.0, except that a lot of men who experience this only play 5 to 10 hours per week due to having a full-time job. That's not a fair question in that scenario. And that is totally accurate on my part, because that's basically my experience now. I work a full-time job, 40 hours a week, and then I have other things and obligations that I have to do, especially now that I'm a homeowner, having to cook my own meals and having to do my own laundry and all my house chores and all that. So at the end of the day, I only get to play video games 5 to 10 hours per week, even though it's probably my favorite hobby at this point in my life. And there are women who would look at that and say, that's bad. You're just an immature loser because you play video games at all. And I take exception to that, because 5 to 10 hours per week playing video games, that's nothing. That's next to nothing. So she says in response, then you're putting on a shoe no one asked you to put on. Your oversensitive nature doesn't mean women can't say things that you decide to unilaterally apply to yourself. So I said in response, that's not a man being oversensitive, that's a woman being radically immature and hypocritical. And that's when she said, no, it's called speaking the truth, grow up. And then she decided to block me, as you can see right here. So all those months, I think maybe even a couple of years, where I was supporting AutoCorrect on Twitter by liking a lot of her posts and sharing posts of hers that made a lot of sense. All of that means nothing, because I dared to call her out over her immature and hypocritical criticism of men playing video games. The reason why it's radically immature for a woman to accuse a man of being an unattractive loser because he plays video games at all is because, one, the video game industry is bigger than the movie industry at this point, which women don't seem to have a problem with existing, or men watching movies in general. But two, lots of women play video games too, so it's not like video games is some loser industry that caters to men. It's a giant industry that appeals to men and women and children and teenagers, everyone in between. So it's very immature to accuse a man of being an unattractive loser just because of his hobby preferences. As long as he's not playing games like Hooney Pop and he's not playing 40 plus hours a week of video games, then there's nothing wrong with him playing video games here and there. It's also incredibly hypocritical for a woman to accuse a man of being an unattractive loser because he plays video games at all. Apparently, it's okie dokie if a modern woman scrolls on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook 7 to 8 hours a day, which is literally them sitting on their butt, passively scrolling through a feed, consuming things with their eyes, but not really engaging their mind. At least with video games, at least with the good video games, you're engaging your mind fully because you're immersed in the story and you're controlling the action to one extent or another. And so you have more immersion, you have more invested emotionally and intellectually into a video game than you do passively scrolling social media like a lot of modern women do. So yeah, it's incredibly hypocritical to be online all day, posting on Twitter all day like AutoCorrect does, but then have a problem with men engaging in a hobby that's more immersive and requires more investment intellectually and emotionally into playing it. You don't doom scroll a video game. You get immersed in it because it's storytelling in a visual and audio way, and you have control over what you do. It's radically hypocritical for women to condemn men of being unattractive losers for playing video games, when many times those same women are the ones who sit on their butts on the couch or in a chair, scrolling through social media and passively consuming content. At least with a video game, a man is not a passive consumer. He's an active consumer because he's immersed in the story and he's controlling the action of the video game to one degree or another. Anyway, that's all I have to say in this video. If you liked what you saw, feel free to hit the subscribe button, check out my other videos, leave your likes and comments down below, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.